Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 27th of February of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. Today we have a lot of negotiations, a lot of talks, a lot of statements, a lot of different events. For example, the president of Ukraine currently is located on the territory of Ireland. He is waiting for a call. He is waiting when the president of the United States of America will call him for a meeting. As for now, the prime minister of the United Kingdom is with Trump, and they're having very difficult negotiations because the prime minister of the United Kingdom came to Washington to Donald Trump with the purpose to convince him and to force him or to ask him to provide security guarantees to the European contingent that most likely the European countries, including the United Kingdom and France, are planning to deploy on the territory of Ukraine. Because without this contingent, without these security guarantees, Ukraine will not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time. And furthermore, Zelensky, without these guarantees, without the European contingent, is not going to sign any deal with the United States of America, and Zelensky is not going to announce any ceasefire, which means that there are going to be no president elections, and Zelensky is not going to return even a single dollar, even a single cent to the United States of America. So currently probably is the most important day. Tomorrow they're going to be probably the ceremony of signature between Zelensky and Trump, but tomorrow is going to be the day when everything will be already resolved. As for now, the most important day is today, the negotiations between the Prime Minister of United Kingdom and Trump. And today they decide whether the United States of America give guarantees, security guarantees or not. If they give, then most likely the special military operation and war will continue, but then this is going to be completely different war, because this is going to be a war between Russia, United Kingdom, France and Ukraine, and these three countries are going to be at the same side, because obviously these three countries, France, Ukraine and United Kingdom, will deploy their forces, peacekeepers, along the line of combat contact, and as soon as it happens, most likely Zelensky will start ruining and breaking the negotiations with Russia. This will be like continuous, supplying with weapon, military trainings and so on, and of course this situation will force the Russians to break the negotiations once again. But this time the Russians will be forced to face not just Ukraine army but France and United Kingdom armies, which will be on the territory of Ukraine under complete US protection. So the situation is very difficult. Today the Russians reported that they will never accept any peacekeepers or any foreign contingent on the territory of Ukraine, but you know that the situation is very difficult, so let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for now, we can say one thing, that the Ukrainians suffer huge losses. The situation for them is very difficult, and we see that the war is coming to an end, and obviously the war is coming to an end in Russian favor. Today we got a lot of very important videos, a lot of very important articles regarding missile strikes that were carried out by the Russians. For example, in this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the area of the settlement by the name of Zaporozhye, and as a result of Iskander strike, the entire FPV drone operators squad was destroyed. The Russians are saying that up to 100 servicemen were wounded or destroyed as a result of this attack. Another important video, almost of the same type, is coming from the northern part. Here we can see the same story. The Ukrainians were deployed in this area with the purposes to probably to prepare themselves before further operations deep inside of the territory of Russia. We see lots of bags, as you can see. We see lots of different equipment that Ukrainians brought with them, and they were trying to hide this equipment from the Russians, from the Russian drones, but the Russians saw everything. And when the Russians provided the coordinates to the Russian units and forces, the Russians attacked this territory with the use of Iskander missile with cluster rounds, and this entire group of Ukrainian forces was destroyed. And this is another group of FPV drone operators, which is very important, and obviously after such a strike nothing could survive. And you know, we already discussed this video in this morning during the previous update, but later during the 27th of February we got a few more updates that came to us from the Sieversk direction, or from the Slaviansk, Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka. Today, as you can see, we have a lot of icons, which means that there were a lot of explosions, and I would like to discuss with you them in details. For example, let's start from the city of Slaviansk, and this is the heart of Donbas Arc operation. This is the heart, and this is the most important target, most valuable target for the Russians since the beginning of the special military operation, because with the fall of Slaviansk and Kramatorsk, we can say that the Russians are about to finish the entire special military operation because their tasks will be about to complete it. And today the Russians attacked this city, not today but on the 25th of February with the use of missiles. And the Russians are saying that the operational command post of this 10 separate mountain assault brigade of the armed forces of Ukraine was completely destroyed. The staff officers were eliminated, the communications and fire control equipment were destroyed. So this attack took place on the 25th of February. And then we have a small description of what exactly was destroyed, what kind of casualties, what kind of vehicles and equipment and so on. And when talking about this 10th mountain assault brigade, this brigade is responsible for defense of the southern Syria area, so which means that this brigade in the very near future might be a bit disorganized if Russians begin their offensive operation. Another explosion, another blow took place in the area of Kramatorsk. As for this attack, the Russians destroyed the tactical command post of the 81st Separate Air Mobile Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The work of the Ukraine Armed Forces electronic warfare systems led to deviation of the strike trajectory. So as for this territory, this attack took place today on the 27th of February, and this 81st Air Mobile Brigade is responsible, or at least was responsible, for protection of the Syria's direction from the north in the vicinity of Grigorovka, Serebryanka and Bilogorovka itself. So as we can see, during the previous 3 days, 2 brigades in this area, 2 command centers, command posts and headquarters of core brigades in this direction were destroyed or damaged. And also we have a lot of updates from the city of Konstantinovka. As for this area, according to the Russians, they managed to damage and to destroy the positions and the command post of 101st Brigade of the General Staff of Ukraine. This attack also took place today on the 27th of February, and this brigade is responsible for the settlement city for the Torez direction and for the Chasiv Yar direction. Furthermore, the Russians reported that at the same time, between the 25th and the 27th of February, they attacked several more positions. They attacked the positions of the 28th Brigade. They attacked the positions of 93rd Brigade, Separate Mechanized Brigade. The Russians attacked the positions of 28. So the most important brigades in this area were attacked by the Russians heavily, and they suffered significant losses, which means that most likely tomorrow, maybe this evening, or maybe in the area between the 27th and the 28th of February, the Russians will begin their major offensive. Why is that? Because tomorrow is the negotiation process between Putin, between Trump and Zelensky. Maybe there's going to be a ceremony of signing of documents. So that's why the Russians will try everything they could with the purpose to ruin this event. And because if the Russians, for example, are able to break through the Ukrainian defense, most likely this can force Zelensky to leave his meeting and his talks with Trump and to return back to Ukraine with the purpose to stabilize the situation. So as for us, we are expecting this upcoming night is going to be very difficult. And probably this is the reason why the Ukrainians during the previous days were counterattacking the Russians in the area of Torez. We continue receiving different videos where we can find more and more pockets of resistance on the territory of the city. In this video, we can see how the Russian soldier, destroyed another position of the armed forces of Ukraine with an anti-tank mine. As you can see, he dropped the mine inside of the stronghold and then he ran away. And then the building was completely destroyed. According to information we have, the Russian soldier destroyed this temporary deployment point. If you remember, yesterday we got video from the most northern part of the city of Torez. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians, as a result of counteroffensive, managed to get the central part and to took under control territory around stadium. So we see that we have more and more updates of Ukrainian counterattacks, and as for now, it's very difficult to understand what exactly the Ukrainians are planning or trying to achieve, but something tells me that as for now, they try to maintain the gray zone. So they try to do the same that the Russians are doing in the Zaporozhye direction. And for example, when talking about yesterday's attack that took place in the northern part, we understand how exactly the Ukrainians could get there. But when talking about the attack, Russian attack on the 27th of February, it's very difficult to understand how exactly the Ukrainians managed to get here. As for this event, as for this video we've just discussed, we believe that maybe this is another pocket of resistance that the Russians still haven't managed to secure and clear as a result of battle for the city of Donetsk. Now let's return a bit back to the territory of Sudzha, because from this pocket we are receiving the most important updates. This is another area where most likely the Russians this night or tomorrow during the meeting between Zelensky, talks between Zelensky and Trump, are going to carry out another attack. For example, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to secure almost the entire northern pocket. According to different sources, according to the official channel of a group of forces North, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, the Russians for the previous several days managed to improve their position significantly. For example, the map and this configuration that you can see right now in front of your screens was the configuration by the end of the 24th of February. And starting on the 25th of February, the Russians began advancing. First, that were just different statements and different videos with the Russians with Russian flags, but everything, let's say, along the territory that was already colored in Russian favor. But starting on the 26th of February, we began adjusting the map. First, we colored the settlement of Orlovka and the southern part of Pogribki, and we colored significant number of territories to the south as a contested area. By the end of the 27th of February, the Russians managed to secure the territory of Novaya Sorochna, Orlovka, Pogribki, and the fields and trees around and between these settlements. And we have video that's where we can find another confirmation that this is exactly what happened. So, and today we got another statement from the Ministry of Defense that the settlement of Novaya Sorochna was secured completely. Furthermore, the Russians reported that they also managed to secure the settlement of Nikolsky. So basically, the Ukrainians have just 4 settlements in this area under their control. This is the settlement of Viktorovka, Nikolaevka, Staraya Sorochna, and Malaya Lokhnya, where most likely the Ukrainians are planning to show their finals, to give the final battle, because this is the former prison, and obviously the Ukrainians will be able to hold their positions for several weeks or even days. Anyway, if we increase the numbers, for example, since the beginning of February, I would like to share with you one video. Let's discuss this video in details. And this is another Russian attack on Ukrainian positions that took place on the 13th of February. And I would like to point your attention to the trenches and the fortifications in this area that were built and prepared by the Ukrainians for the previous 6 months. We need to understand that currently nobody has more or less reliable map that can show us more or less reliable dense trenches, fortifications, and so on, but I would like to tell you that everything in Sudzha direction was already turned by the Ukrainians from regular fields, regular constructions into strongholds and trenches. Every single square meter in this area, it was prepared by the Ukrainians for defense. It's a very difficult task for the Russians to advance. And it was completely impossible without Russian progress in the southern part of Sudzha. By the way, today we got another report that the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to secure the eastern part of the settlement of Lebedevka. And most likely, and very likely, that tomorrow the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this information, and we will adjust Lebedevka in Russian favor. And most likely, in the very near future, the Russians will try to maintain the lines between the settlement of Nikolsk and Lebedevka and to cut this pocket, because currently there are still a lot of Ukrainians in this area from the 47th mechanized, from the 92nd, and they would be forced to fall back towards the settlement of Kazachia Lokhnya. So anyway, we believe that tomorrow obviously the Russians will not be able to defeat the Ukrainians completely in this area, but most likely during the next several weeks the Russians will try to cut the territories and to get as close as possible to the Sudzha agglomeration itself. But anyway, despite Russian activities in the northern part, we still believe that the main strike the Russians are planning to carry out in the southern part from the settlement of Kurilovka further in the western direction, and the Russians will try to get as close as possible to the border between Ukraine and the Russian Federation and to force the Ukrainians to fall back, because exactly from this area since the beginning of the month we got the biggest number of different videos where we can see how the Russians were destroying the temporary deployment points and positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with the use of a significant number of FAB 3000s and FAB 1500. Almost every single square kilometer in this area was bombed and attacked by the Russians, which means that the Russians, before their offensive operation, are planning first to reduce these territorial ruins, and when it happens they will begin the ground operation. And we believe that this ground operation is going to start very soon, because the Russians began not just bombing and attacking the Ukrainian temporary deployment points, the Russians began destroying Ukrainian logistic. They tried to destroy as many as possible bridges, pontoon bridges that Ukrainians can use to supply and support their forces in this pocket during the Russian offensive. So, and this is exactly what the Russians are going to do. And once again, if the Russians somehow are able to take under control this pocket between these settlements and to establish complete control over this territory, this will lead to complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine, and probably this will lead to the end of the entire Sudzha pocket with the significant losses from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. You know that today we got lots of updates that the Russians began advancing, and the main purpose of the Russians is to get to the Dnipro region. The Ukrainian sources are saying that currently the main target of the Russians is to establish complete control over this territory. So everything that is currently located inside of this area we are adding to map is the primary target for the Russians. And the Russians will try to take these territories under complete control before the end of the negotiation process. And as for now, they are focused in this area, and they're sending everything they have exactly in this direction. So that's why the Ukrainians understand that for them it's the best time to counterattack in the area of Pokrovsk. And during the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to counterattack at several positions and to restore control over the settlement of Kotlina almost completely, and the Ukrainians managed to enter the settlement of Pishana once again. So the situation here is very critical, and we see that the Russians as for now can't stabilize the situation. It's very difficult to stabilize because it's very difficult to fight against the Ukrainians in the city of Pokrovsk. It's a very big stronghold where the Ukrainians can keep their forces hidden as long as possible and to use forces right before attack. And to reveal own forces right before attack. And obviously this time is not enough for the Russians to discover and to counterattack. Anyway, we believe that if the situation continues developing the same way, most likely during the next several weeks or days, if the situation continues the same, the Ukrainians will be able to restore control over this pocket and to force the Russians to fall back. So this might happen, and Ukrainians are going to do this because currently this is already something like a pocket where the Russians suffer losses. The Russians, to hold their positions, first need to improve their positions further in the western direction and to get the Dnipro region. With this foothold, with these positions, Ukrainians will lose possibilities to attack the Russians with artillery and FPV drones, because the Russians will be able to stretch their forces along the entire territory, and they will minimize the risk and minimize the losses. As for the Zaporozhye direction, as we discussed, currently we are receiving a lot of updates from this area, and very likely that the Ukrainians are going to counterattack in this territory also right before the Russians and the Ukrainians about to finish to sign a peace agreement, because there are going to be several weeks when both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, will try to improve their positions as much as possible, because then they will sign documents and war will finish and most likely will never start again. So that's why it's very important for Ukrainians before this date to take as many as possible territories despite the losses and despite everything. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds me to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.